Canto 7 of Limbus Company is all about blood, so of course you would expect the identities of this Canto season to interact with bleed as much as possible. However, as the year went from 2024 to 2025, something changed drastically, and the teams that ended up getting a lot of content were Poise and Burn. And in the most recent update to Limbus Company, we got an identity that further solidified the importance of these two teams. Cinq Association East Don Quixote. And yes, it's true that Don already has a Cinq identity, but this one is different, as it combines both Burn and Poise into a new hybrid subtype that you probably should not abbreviate. But is the new Don Quixote any good? Or is she here just to rub in the fact that Poise and Burn have been getting a lot of love recently? In today's video, I want to figure out exactly that. We'll go over Don's kit, and then we'll talk about her strengths and weaknesses, while also looking at whether the new identity is better suited for Poise or for Burn, as she does try to carve out two places at once for herself. But before we start, I have to tell you that most of my viewers are not subscribed, and if you find yourself coming back to my videos or end up enjoying this one, consider subscribing. It takes just 1 second and helps me out a lot. Without further ado, let's get back to our new Poise-Burn identity. We'll start with her kit. Cinq East Don Quixote is an identity with a high speed roll of 4 to 7 and large health pool of 223 HP at level 50. All of her skills inflict pierce damage, and her sin affinity spread consists of Gluttony, Wrath and Pride, with a Wrath defense. Don's first skill is Fa Jin. It, much like every other skill in Don's kit, gains coin power when Don is faster than her enemy by a certain amount. With the maximum power of this effect, Fa Jin reaches 15 power. On use, Don gets 3 poise count, and the coins of the skill inflict a total of 2 burn, with a bonus of 1 burn count on crit with the second coin. Don's second skill is Veracent Flame Palm. With full conditionals it reaches 22 power. On Clash Win with this skill, Don gains 3 poise, as well as additional poise count equal to Nerve Strike on target. We'll get to what that means after we're done with the skills. The coins of Flame Palm give Don 2 poise count, inflict 4 burn, and also inflict defense level down based on burn on target, with even more defense level down infliction based on Nerve Strike on target as well. Don's third skill is Prithee, let this be an enlightening bout. Which again, I have to go on record saying that I really dislike this type of skill names, but we won't be talking about that today. This skill reaches 24 power with conditionals and deals 15% more damage per Nerve Strike on target, up to 45%. On Clash Win with the skill, Don gains 5 poise, as well as 3 more poise if the target has Nerve Strike. The first 3 coins of the skill simply inflict a total of 4 burn, but the last one does something a bit more interesting. The fourth coin deals more damage on crit based on poise on Don, as well as burn on the target, up to a combined cap of 50%. Also, if the target has Nerve Strike, the coin inflicts 3 defense level down. As for defensive skills, Don gets an evade with an even longer skill name. The skill has no effects except Don's universal coin power conditional, but it's probably here just to let her help make Wrath chains. As for her passives, Don only gets 1. It requires 2 Wrath and 2 Pride to activate, and it gives Don haste every turn based on her poise potency. It also allows Don to inflict Nerve Strike on the next turn after hitting an enemy with a base attack skill. And this is the part where I talk about Nerve Strike. This effect is similar in nature to other sync association effects, such as declared duel and focused attack, and it incentivizes you to use Dawn against bosses. Nerve Strike can be stacked up to 3 times, and applying more stacks of the effect increases Dawn's clash and base power against that enemy. The effect expires if Dawn inflicts it on another enemy, or if a different Sinner's Nerve Strike is inflicted on the same enemy. So yeah, Nerve Strike is just a mark that slightly buffs Dawn's power and increases the value of her skills in boss fights and focused encounters. Back to her passive, Dawn also gets to deal more damage on crit based on burn on the enemy, with the cap starting out at 15% bonus damage and being increased up to 30% based on Nerve Strike on the target. As for Dawn's support passive, it requires 3 res resonance to activate, and allows the ally with the highest speed to gain haste when winning clashes against enemies with burn. The effect is doubled if said enemy has 20 burn or more. With that, we're done with Dawn's kit. Now we can talk about using the identity. And immediately Dawn will have to fight for a spot on both teams, as burn has actual options now, so it's not an auto slot for the new identity. Speaking of burn, let's start with that team and look at what Dawn brings to the table on the burn front. And what she brings is mainly damage. More specifically, she brings single target pierce damage that ramps up over time. If we compare Dawn's damage to other identities on the burn team, we can see that she actually performs on a level that is above average, provided she is put in a situation where she can use her kit efficiently. By that I mean that Dawn excels at fighting bosses. In single target encounters, Dawn has a very easy time stacking up her Nerve Strike, which makes losing clashes with her skills practically impossible. The easy access to Nerve Strike also increases the amount of poise Dawn gains with her skills, and as long as she maintains the Nerve Strike stacks on the enemy, Dawn will often easily hold on to her poise stack without losing it. Also, when fighting only one enemy, creating and maintaining a large burn stack is extremely easy, and that kind of stack is exactly what Dawn needs to deal even more damage on crit. Combine the easy access to poise with the burn stacks that cap out her passive and third skill's damage bonus effects, and it becomes clear that every aspect of Dawn's kit absolutely shines in longer boss fight scenarios. However, on the other side of Limbus Company's fights, if Dawn is placed inside of a non-focused encounter, her strength drops significantly. Without the ability to target an enemy, keeping up multiple stacks or even using a singular Nerve Strike becomes an impossible dream, leading to a decrease in poise gain, damage and debuff infliction. But that's not all, as keeping up more than a handful of burn potency on the entire enemy team is also a difficult ordeal, meaning that Dawn will not get the full benefits of her damage bonuses, driving her damage numbers even further into the ground. This is not helped by the fact that Dawn has no effects that interact with more than one enemy. She not only never targets more than a single slot, but she also cannot spread burn to multiple enemies at once. She does still have access to Yorin Merkala, however, but I am not sure that is enough of a reason to say that she is still acceptable in human fights. Another one of Dawn's weaknesses that I have to address is the fact that while it's true that Dawn can maintain a poise stack without much difficulty, actually getting to a decent amount of poise potency takes quite some time. This is especially problematic because of the fact that most of Dawn's damage bonuses only apply on critical hit, making them a lot less reliable in the early turns of a fight. Before giving Dawn a verdict regarding her place in the burn team, I do have to quickly go over her non-damage value. In terms of burn infliction, Dawn does not stand out at all. She inflicts a very average amount of burn and gets outclassed by any identity that's considered an above average burn inflictor. But considering the fact that Dawn's main niche is dealing damage, her not having a particularly bad burn infliction is a good thing, as this would have definitely been worse. Another effect Dawn inflicts is same turn defense level down, and with the fact that Dawn is a Cinq Identity and thus stacks haste, it's fairly common for her to go first in a turn and inflict that effect on the enemy, allowing the rest of her team to deal more damage. Once again, this is valuable on bosses, and pretty useless against multiple enemies. So overall, on a burn team, Dawn's main role is being an anti-boss damage dealer, who thrives in scenarios where she can maximize the value of every part of her kit, and deal tons of extra damage. As for who she should be replacing, I feel like you can come up with a couple of options. But a safe one is just swapping out Lou Rodia and going for a team like this. However, do note that while Dawn gets a lot stronger with Burn, Burn doesn't exactly get that much stronger with her on the team. So if you're trying to make a Burn team, getting the new Dawn should not exactly be a priority. But hey, I might be wrong about that, so make sure to leave a comment down below with your own ideas as to whether to use her in Burn and who to switch out. Next up, let's take a look at Poise. In Poise, Dawn once again is a damage dealer with a bit of debuffing in her kit. Mechanically, she is similar to Cinq Sinclair, who also stacks haste, gets a bunch of poise count from skills 1 and 2, and increases the damage of his allies by inflicting a debuff on the enemy, all while only dealing pierce damage and performing better against bosses than enemy groups. And Cinq Sinclair is already an identity that isn't necessarily on the stronger side of Poise IDs. So to figure out whether Dawn can get a spot on the team, let's compare the two. On the base damage side of things, the two identities have similar kits, with Dawn dealing slightly more damage without conditionals. However, as soon as the conditionals come into play, the differences in these two identities start to show. Both IDs get their strengths from being faster than the opponent, and both of them also get access to ways to speed themselves up, in order to take advantage of these effects more easily. Sinclair gets his speed from 3 sources. His first skill, which grants him 2 haste, his passive, which grants him max speed and has a very high cap, and Declared Duel, which allows Sinclair to get even more haste from repeatedly attacking the same opponent. Dawn, on the other hand, only gets haste from her passive, and that passive is capped at 2 haste. Also, Dawn's base speed values are slightly lower than Sinclair's. All of this means that Dawn is simply a slower identity. Now, that doesn't mean that she never gets her conditionals, it just means that Dawn will have a harder time getting the full value of her skills consistently, as she will mostly rely on the bind that other Poise identities can inflict. On the bonus damage side of things, Sinclair, once again, shows more consistency than Dawn. His bonus damage on the last coin of his third skill is fixed at 50% on crit. Dawn also gets 50% bonus damage on crit on her third skill, but that effect requires Dawn to have a lot of poise, or to inflict burn on the target. And while burn infliction is pretty clearly not a possibility in a Poise team, the Poise requirement doesn't make this easier. Dawn needs 50 Poise potency to reach the cap, which happens very late into the encounter if at all, meaning that most of the time the value of this effect will stay at less than half of its true potential. Of course, Dawn also gets bonus damage from her passive, but that damage is entirely locked behind burn, which once again you will not get, as Dawn lacks the burn count infliction to keep up a burn stack. The final part that can be compared is the debuff infliction. Cinq Sinclair's greatest asset is his access to 2 stacks of Fragile, which he inflicts with his third skill. It's a 20% damage increase for all his allies, and as we have discussed previously, Sinclair's speed can be easily increased to very high numbers, meaning that the other 5 identities will often get to enjoy the damage bonuses without missing out on them by going before the Inflictor. Dawn inflicts defense level down instead, which is a much less potent debuff. Her third skill only inflicts 3 stacks of the effect, which does not even result in half of the value that 2 stacks of Fragile provide. However, Dawn's second skill also inflicts defense level down, and again, does so inconsistently. If taken at its max potential, then sure, Dawn's debuffs are actually stronger than Sinclair's over a full skill rotation. However, that's only true in a vacuum, and in reality, the second skill will often just inflict 1 or 2 defense level down at best. On top of that, Dawn does not get access to the majority of her debuff infliction, as it is locked behind Burn, and her lower speed makes it possible for the strongest damage dealer of the team, who also stacks haste, to outspeed her and miss out on the effect. However, if Dawn is given a fight of the appropriate length and somehow gets access to Burn, she can actually outdo Sinclair in pretty much every aspect of her kit. But of course, that is only possible in a hypothetical scenario. In reality, she will often not get to her strongest position, and thus will perform worse than Sinclair. All in all, Cinque's Dawn is an identity with a higher ceiling, but far less consistency than Cinq Sinclair, and I, personally, would not recommend pulling for her if you want to fill out your Poise team. And with that, we're done with this overview of Cinq Association East Don Quixote. Making this video took me far longer than I expected, but I hope you still enjoyed it. The new identity is certainly not weak, but when put up against other options, she just isn't anything special. Which is a damn shame, honestly, considering just how cute her splash art is. But again, if you disagree or have something to add, feel free to leave a comment below, and I will make sure to read all of them. If you enjoyed the video at any point, leave a like to let me know, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!